Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Every day it gets clearer and clearer that Donald Trump wants to January 6th, the midterms. And the president fundamentally does not believe in free and fair elections. He wants to use any means at his disposal, legal or not, peaceful or not, to ensure he and his party retain power regardless of what the voters say. Of course, listening to what the voters say is the very essence of democracy. And so to that end, tonight, 1 hour from now, he would deliver a primetime address on what he claims, we think, although who knows, but as of now, he claims is interference in the 2020 election. Yes, you heard that correctly, 2020, the election he lost 6 years ago. Now, predicting what will come out of Donald Trump's mouth is a fool's errand. I mean, even his teleprompter operator can't do that. But MS Now reports Trump pre-gamed the speech this week by holding a closed-door meeting with a bunch of notorious cranks and conspiracy theorists, the people who feed into his delusions about a stolen election. And other reporting indicates Trump's fellow Republicans are terrified of what he'll say tonight. As one former Trump administration official told Politico, quote, "The people I talk to are scared shitless." But no one can act surprised that Trump is doing this, of course. Every day, there are new examples of how his administration and his Republican enablers in Congress, in the House and the Senate are obsessed with subverting our free and fair elections. They don't want a free and fair election to happen this fall. Last week, to pick just one of the latest examples, Trump fired the commissioners on the Election Assistance Commission. It's never been done before, just a few months before an election, throwing their midterm preparations into chaos, trying to clear the way, we imagine, for potential misconduct. In fact, one of those fired commissioners told PBS News he thinks he was fired due to the president's anti-voter rhetoric.
Taken together, the firings, the effective neutralizing of this commission, the president's persistent lies about the 2020 election that he lost, the calls to change mail-in voting and voter registration, what do you believe is the president's broader objective here?
I don't know. But I think that, it might be the anti-voter rhetoric that's going out. But I want to assure the American people to still cast their votes. And if they have doubts about the system in other aspects, to serve as a poll worker.
As Jeff Bennett alluded to there, the White House is also targeting voter rolls. This has been a kind of long-running story here, an obsession. So last year, the Department of Justice sent threatening letters to every state, essentially trying to shake them down for access to unredacted voter registration data while searching for non-existent instances of fraud. The obvious goal, to suppress the vote, keep eligible Democrats or people likely to be Democrats from casting their ballots. Now, they keep losing those fights in court after court after court, in state after state after state. But again, as we saw with January 6th, that didn't stop them. They kept going, right? Trump's trying another avenue to achieve the same ends. He's also trying to use the U.S. Postal Service via an executive order to determine effectively who gets a mail ballot. Like the USPS will get to kind of veto who gets to vote by mail. The court also blocked that order, which directed the USPS to only deliver ballots to states that gave the federal government a list of pre-approved voters. Of course, right now, the president's main goal is the large voter suppression bill that he's obsessed with and kind of monomaniacally focused on. He calls it the SAVE Act. He's threatening to basically shut down the entire Senate and any hopes of any larger legislative agenda in pursuit of passing it. It's a really ridiculous, unwieldy piece of legislation. It could have the effect of making it exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for many Americans, like including millions of married women whose last names have changed when they got married, making it well nigh impossible for them to vote. Again, take all this together, right? Take what the president says about how much he admires people like Putin or Xi or the dictator in North Korea. The guy just fundamentally does not believe in democracy. His party, let's remember, has already undertaken this totally unprecedented mid-cycle gerrymandering project across multiple states. Never happened in my lifetime. It will likely result in Republicans gaining an additional 10 or more, as many as 12 seats in the House, by disenfranchising Democratic voters, especially targeting voters of color to be disenfranchised. He is using the Department of Justice to target what his administration calls radical leftism. Do you think they're going to do that responsibly? Or do you think they're going to target his political opponents? Consider the fact that, as Talking Points memo in a great bit of reporting scooped, The prosecutor leading that charge marched to the Capitol on January 6th. Although, we should say, he did not enter the building, nor was he charged with the crime. Marched to the Capitol on January 6th, though. And as we speak, the Senate is weighing whether or not to confirm Trump's aggressively unqualified choice for the Director of National Intelligence. That guy, Jay Clayton, has one task, if and when he is confirmed, it would seem, to weaponize our 18 intelligence agencies to pursue preventing free and fair elections. It's something his predecessor, Tulsi Gabbard, was kind of messing around. And she started it when she led that raid on the election headquarters in Fulton County, Georgia. The Director of National Intelligence, what is she doing there? Why is she seizing ballots in Fulton County, looking for non-existent evidence of fraud in the 2020 election? And here's the thing. Clayton has served in other administrations. There's people that respect him who think he's a serious grown-up and he's an adult and all that. But by all appearances, Clayton intends on finishing the job. Whether he intends to or not, that's clearly what Trump wants him to do. But get this. He telegraphed his willingness to do so before the Senate yesterday when he refused on multiple occasions to simply state the plain truth that everybody knows, which is that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. He couldn't do it. Why can't he do it? The through line of all this, which really started with Bush v. Gore in the modern era, at least, when the Supreme Court effectively decided the 2000 election unilaterally, is that way too many Republicans, not just Donald Trump, believe elections only count if they win. Otherwise, there must have been fraud. I mean, Vice President J.D. Vance essentially admitted as much recently when he enthusiastically endorsed Joe Rogan's total nonsense, illogical, self-contradictory conspiracy theory about fraud in the Los Angeles mayor race.
The voter ID solves a lot of the mail-in ballot problem, because if you have to show an ID in order to get a mail-in ballot, in order to actually, confirm that there's a real identification attached to that vote, that solves a big chunk of the problem,
this
too.
This is just logical.
Yes.
I'm not
every country
skeptical.
does it.
I'm not skeptical. I'm accusing them. I think they stole the election.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think it's common.
Okay, that's the Los Angeles mayoral election, one of the most democratic cities in America, right? I'm not accusing them. I think they stole the election. And J.D. Vance says, yes. They stole the election. Karen Bass stole the election to put a Democrat who's much more of a threat to her in the number 2 position. That's what happened. In the city of Los Angeles, the Democratic city of Los Angeles, they had to steal election to beat a Republican who's never held elected office before and who was the villain on the reality show he was on like 2 decades ago. Really? You can say a lot of things about J.D. Vance. I don't think he's a stupid man. I mean, his brain may be totally poisoned by Twitter, but he understands how California counts votes, and he thinks the American people are just dumb enough to believe obvious lies. That's the whole play here. I think that might be true of Trump, too. And it's all going to come to a head tonight when the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the country, arguably the world, comes out to inevitably trot out a bunch of insane, misleading, and obviously debunked claims about the, wait for it, 2020 election he lost. Not just to pursue his own, perhaps senile delusions, but as an obvious pretext for now to sabotage, undermine, subvert the results of the midterm elections that he is terrified his party will lose because he is indeed a failed, unpopular president.